Hi. When I grew up in England and France and in the Middle East, I was exposed to all kinds of food. And some of it was, sort of similar with some differences. In England, I liked the food because it was not particularly spicy. And in France, the sauces were amazing for all the meals. My family are vegetarians. And so when I went to Mexico, I was surprised at the amount of meat. And, the food was lovely. The rice and beans and beef and chicken. And one taco I ate in Mexico, I discovered that I'd eaten cow brains, which was very unexpected and surprising. Think about an example from your life. What was surprising or not so surprising when you visited another country or came in contact with another culture? Sometimes we want to express cultural surprises. We also want to express what we learned that is not surprising, but interesting. So I'm going to go today, and we're going to be talking about words that indicate, a similarity between two things, but not so contrasted and not so surprising. In other words, that alert us to something that is unexpected and surprising. So some of the words that we use are different types of words. And the first one we're going to look at are conjunctions, but and yet. So in France and other countries, women work and take care of children, and they do so, and they work a little differently in different parts of the world. And in France, most women combine full-time work with family responsibilities. But in the UK, most women work part-time and raise families. So it's a little variation, in general. So we use the word but. It's not particularly surprising, but it's a little bit different, and it's interesting information. In the Saudi Arabia, only 21% of women work. When I lived in Bahrain, I didn't see many women in the public spaces. Yet in the U.S., 75% of mothers are in the labor force, and that's quite a contrast. And we would use the word yet to explain that this is unexpected and different, significantly different. When we use conjunctions, we have to remember to put a comma before the conjunction. Sometimes we use conjunctions, although it is very extremely informal, at the front of the sentence, in which case that's a little different than what I'm demonstrating here. But in this, when the conjunction is connecting the two clauses in the center, then you would need a comma. Other types of words are subordinators, and we're going to look at while and even though. So living in different countries, I was exposed to different dinner times. And in France, dinner is at 7 o'clock or 8 p.m., while in the UK, with tea time at 4, dinner is usually at 8. So it's a latter end of what France's dinner span is. And so in this case, I'm using the word while because the two things are not so different. They vary a little, and they are not surprising. My friends and family in the U.S. eat dinner anywhere between 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., even though in Spain, dinner starts as late as 10:30 p.m. So that is a big difference, and that is surprising to me. When you put subordinators before the dependent clause, we can also change the order of the clauses. If you put the dependent clause first, then we need to use a comma after that clause. Transition words are another way to talk about our experiences and which are surprising and which are not. As my example at the beginning of this presentation, I was discussing the food. So here is a written version of my story. In France, people enjoy eating potatoes, French bread, fish, and chicken with delicious sauces. However, in England, people primarily eat potatoes with butter, beef, and chicken. In this case, it is not surprising, and we use the word however. In this case, I am using it as one sentence. And when we use it as one sentence, the first clause will have a semicolon after the first clause and a comma after the transition word. My family in the United States are vegetarians. Nevertheless, in Mexico, people eat beef, chicken, and rice, and I accidentally ate cow brains. Showing surprise, I'm using the word nevertheless. In this instance, I am separating the two statements in different sentences. There's a period at the end of the first sentence, and nevertheless begins the second sentence, and has a comma after the word nevertheless. So we've reviewed conjunctions, but and yet, subordinators, while and even though, transition words of nevertheless and however. Pick two different types of contrast and compare words above to connect the statements below. Which statement is surprising? So here's an example of how we might connect these sentences and concepts. You may be using different words, and in which case you can check your answers by going through the slides and finding a similar word choice. In this case, I'm going to use nevertheless and while. People throughout Europe use public transportation, period. Nevertheless, in the United States, people travel independently in private cars. Those two experiences are very different and surprising, I'm sure, for people that come to the United States and see that we do not have a really good public transportation that everybody uses. While in England, many people ride public Decker buses. In France, people travel by public high-speed train. In both cases, they're using public transportation, so I'm using the word while. It's not surprising, it's a little different. Remember the comma after the first clause. So now I'd like you to write a short comparison contrast essay about some aspect of American or other culture which was different from your own, including something that is surprising. And feel free to go and review the slides if you need to consult it. And I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job.